What I wanted to talk about today for Parshas CHAYA SARAH is the part of Avraham's life, his chapter 2. The Prudential Life Insurance Company is a U.S. life insurance company. They did a bunch of videos a few years back about people who created their chapter 2 in life. You know, sometimes you can reinvent yourself and start all over again in middle age. People can do that, and that was like the whole theme of the campaign. A friend of mine was in one of those videos. He had been in a terrible accident and was able to just create his own chapter 2, and it was just amazing. Anyway, if you want to see the video, I'll show it to you later. Avraham's chapter 2, or maybe it's his chapter 3 or 4, I'm not even sure. But the Torah says that after Sarah dies, Vayosef Avraham vayikach isha u'shma Keturah. Avram goes ahead, moves on with his life, and he takes a new bride. Her name is Keturah. Now, different opinions as who Keturah was, but at face value, she seems to be from either a Canaanite or Egyptian family. He has several children with her, which is indicative of the fact that although, and the Abarbanel points this out, although he had such difficulty having Yishmael and Yitzchak, he only had children later in life, but he still had his vitality. The Abarbanel attributes that to his bris milah, which really revitalized Avraham and made him spry and young again, and he was able to build a whole new family. Now, what's the significance of this story? How does it play in to the larger framework of the life work of Avraham? Is the Torah merely telling me the story to sort of just tell me the fact that Avraham moved on with his life after Sarah? You know, like the old joke is, like if a man is sitting shiva for his wife, Nebuch, so then to raise the subject of a shidduch during the shiva is crass, but if you wait until the shloshim, you're too late, right? Is that the idea? Is that, you know, like the old joke goes? Is that what the Torah is trying to tell me, that Avram found happiness in life after the love of his life, Sarah, passed away? There's got to be more here. There's got to be a message of what our sages are trying to teach us. Take a look at a very bizarre story in the Talmud Bavli, Masechet Zvachim, page 62b, source number 2. Bnei Achte de Rebbe Tarfon havu yasvi kamei de Rebbe Tarfon. The nephews of Rebbe Tarfon were just sitting there at his house in front of him, and Pasach va'amar, and he opened up his mouth, Rebbe Tarfon, and stated as follows: Vayosef Avraham vayikach isha u'shma Yuchni. That Avraham took a new wife, quoting the pasuk verbatim, but he misquotes the last word of the pasuk. Instead of saying that her name was Keturah, he said her name was Yuchni. Yuchni. What does that name even mean? Yeah. So his nephews chime in, Amrilei, Keturah ksiv. Uncle Tarfon, you misquoted the pasuk. It says Keturah was her name. Kari alehem Bnei Keturah. That's who you are. You're the children of Keturah. End of story. Bizarre story, yes, wouldn't you say? They're sitting there in front of their uncle. He misquotes the pasuk and says that Avram married a second wife. Her name was Yuchni. And they said, but the pasuk says her name was Keturah. And he says, you're the children of Keturah. End of story. So what is going on over here? First of all, we have to figure out who was this Yuchni. The only mention that we have of a woman named Yuchni in the entire Talmud is in Tractate Sota, where mention is made of a woman named Yuchni who was a witch. The Gemara talks about an older widow who is constantly moving her lips. The Gemara says you must suspect that she's a witch, such as the woman named Yuchni. And who was Yuchni? So Rashi gives us the background information of who Yuchni was. Source number 3 says, Almana mechashefa haita. She was a witch. Ucheshemagia eit leidat isha. When a woman would be about to go into labor, haita otzeret rachma b'machashefut. she would use incantations to prevent her womb from opening, to prevent the dilation of her cervix. This would cause her tremendous pain and would endanger the child. ולאחר שמצטערת הרבה הייתה אומרת, אלך ואקש רחמים אולי תשמע תפילתי. Then she goes over to the woman and says, I see you're in so much pain. I'll go and pray to Hashem. Maybe he'll listen to my prayers. And v'holechet v'soteret kshafeha v'havlad yotzei. And then she would undo the magic spell, and the cervix would immediately dilate, and she'd be able to have the child. And this is how she was able to convince people that she had special connections to God, is that she would do this kind of trick. Okay? Pamechas hayela sachir yom beveita v'yelcha lebeita isha yoledet v'shama sachir kol hakshafim miskashkeshin b'kli kamo shehavlad mikashkesh b'mei ha'em uva patach et magof et hakli v'akshafim yatzu v'avlad nolad v'yadu ki balat kshafim. And then Rashi tells us that what happened one day is that there was a worker in her house, and he discovered what she was doing, and she was exposed. She was exposed as a charlatan, as a false pious woman, and that was really what the Gemara was trying to explain, is that sometimes people display external piety, and they're really not pious. Anyway, but that's a separate issue. Yuchni was a witch. Now, what does this have to do with Rebbe Tarfa? I'm going to get back to the story in a moment, but first let's try and understand why the Torah feels it relevant, why Hashem felt it relevant to record this chapter of Avraham's life. So the first thing I want to point out is the Abarbanel. The Abarbanel provides us with 6 separate reasons why this story is important for us to know. But the very first reason that he provides, he writes as follows. Aval echshov ani b'davar hazeh. I think that the first answer is Hashem Yisbarach Heirat Ruach Avraham La'asot Kain L'Sibot. God inspired Avraham to remarry for a number of reasons. Rishona L'Kayem Devaro Asher Amar Unisaticha L'Goyim Ki Av Hamon Goyim Nisaticha. The first thing is that God promised Avraham that he would be the father of multiple nations. If you go back to Genesis chapter 17, why did God change Avram's name to Avraham? Because Avraham, the added letter Hey, is implying the word Hamon. There will be a multitude of nations that will descend from you, Avraham, not just one nation. We fail sometimes because we're so Judeo-centric in our thinking, and rightfully so. We sometimes overlook the parts of the stories of our Avos and Imahos which are more universalistic in nature. The whole story of Avraham being renamed to Avraham is a universal message. It's not a message that is specific to the Jewish people. It's not particular. It's universal. What God was telling Avraham is that your duty is to be a light unto all of the nations, and therefore you will sire many nations who will come under your umbrella, under your banner of being an Abrahamic people. And that's why we have Yishmael, we have Esav to this day, and we have so many other nations that are descended from Avraham. And so the Abarbanel says that what inspired Avraham to remarry is that he knew, all I have are Yishmael and Yitzchak. Maybe if, in order to fulfill God's covenant more fully, I need to have more children who will propagate and become that Hamon Goyim, the multitude of nations that God said will emanate from me, will descend from me. And that was Avraham's intent, and that was really, or the way the Abarbanel says, that's why God inspired Avraham to remarry, because he wanted him to fulfill that covenant, that promise that he had made with him. So that's point number 1. And that's the simple reason why the Torah finds it necessary to tell us that there are many nations that come from Avraham. And the way, in retrospect, looking back upon it with thousands of years of perspective, we can look at the nations of the world and understand how monotheism and the biblical values of one God presenting a moral code to mankind has spread throughout the world because Avraham was able to propagate through his own descendants this message. And that message was then spread to the rest of the world who were not Avraham's kin. But that was the idea, is that that's why the Torah tells us that he had more children, and there are different opinions. There are different, historians have different opinions as to what happened to the Bnei Keturah. Some say that they went to India and Asia, and therefore we get Brahmanism and other types of semi-monotheistic beliefs that emanate from Avraham through the Bnei Keturah. Others understand that they went to the Arabian Peninsula and that the Arabs are descendants of Bnei Keturah, and they eventually intermarried with the Bnei Yishmael, which is where we get the Arab world from today. But whatever the belief is that we know that they were part of this family of man that all is descended from Avraham. And if indeed Avraham's task is to be a light unto the nations, as Isaiah says, it makes sense that Avraham would want to propagate his own family to spread that message to the rest of the world. So that's one idea that I think we have to keep in mind. But we have to go now back to the story of Rebbe Tarfon. I want to point out something very important. If you take a look at the story of Yosef's sale into slavery, something very curious comes up. And this is just a really minor point in the story, but it's really relevant to the Bnei Keturah. Take a look at the names of the people who were involved in the sale of Yosef, from the brothers to the point that he got down to Mitzrayim. They were Vayimkeru et Yosef LaYishmaelim. In chapter 37 of Genesis it says, they sold Yosef to the Yishmaelim, to the Ishmaelites, for 20 pieces of silver. Vayaviat Yosef Mitzrayim. I'm sorry. If you start with the first part of the pasuk, it says Vayavru Anashim Midyanim Socharim. That Midianites came. They were the first ones that the brothers sold Yosef to. And who is Midian descended from? Keturah. One of the children of Keturah is Midian. If you take a look at the source number 1, Vateled lo et Zimran ve'et Yokshan ve'et Midan ve'et Midian ve'et Yishbak ve'et Shuach. Who are Keturah's sons? Well, 2 of them are clear from the Yosef story, Midan and Midian. So the Midianites are the first people who are involved in Yosef's purchase or sale. Then Bnei Yishmael get involved, the Yishmaelim, and then later on in Pasuk Lamed Vav it says, V'hamidanim machru oto el Mitzrayim. The Midanim, not the Midianim, but the Midanim, the children of Midan. So Keturah has 2 sons, Midian and Midan. The Midianites are the first part of the sale, the Midanim are the last part of the sale, and Yishmael is somewhere in between. Is there a pattern here? The descendants of Avraham, including the Bnei Keturah, are involved in the sale of Yosef. Why were they such eager accomplices? So it's important to realize that if you're Bnei Keturah, there's a natural resentment that you have towards Yitzchak. Especially when, normally, as the Abarbanel points out, normally when a man gets married a second time and he starts a whole new family, usually it's the younger children who garner the affection of the father, and sometimes the father forgets about the children from the first family because they're older already, they're self-sufficient, you boys can take care of yourselves, I got to take care of my new family. That was not the case at all with Avraham. In Avraham's case, he focused all of his attention, his primary focus was on Yitzchak, even after he had all of these children from Keturah. He gave the Bnei Keturah gifts, he sends them off to the east, and makes sure that they're all taken care of. But his primary progeny always remains Yitzchak. And that can create resentment, as I'm sure you can appreciate. And that resentment is part of the latent anti-Semitism that exists within the nations of the world. It's been passed, it's part of the genetics of all of those who are descended from Avraham and are not from Yitzchak. It just is.
But they also saved his life by taking him out of the pit.
It doesn't, no, it doesn't, well, it says that they took him out of the pit, but the way we understand the story is because Yosef's brothers sold him. It says, it was under the sort of supervision of Yehuda. Yehuda says, Ma betza, I don't have the pasuk for you, but Yehuda says, why should we let him die? Let's sell him. L'chuvenim karenu la Yishmaelim. Let's go sell him to the Ishmaelites. So it was all the brothers' plan to sell him, and they happened to find Midianites who were passing by. He says, here, we got a boy for sale. Would you want him? They said, sure, we'll take him. And they pulled him out. They sold him to the Ishmaelites. The Ishmaelites sold him to the Midanim, and that's what happened. Anyway, let's go back to our story, and with this we'll finish. Rabbi Tarfon had a bunch of nephews from his sister. Rabbi Tarfon was a very wealthy man. That's the part of the story that you don't get. He's got nephews sitting there at the table not saying a word because they got a rich Uncle Scrooge, probably, who they perceived was rich Uncle Scrooge, that they have a lot of resentment towards because our dad never made it as big as Uncle Tarfon. And so they're just sitting there being polite and not saying anything. Rabbi Tarfon is able to figure this out. He's a smart, very, very smart man. And he sees the latent resentment that he sees growing among his nephews. And so he quotes a pasuk. And he says, oh, Avram married a new wife. Her name was Yochni. What was he alluding to them? You know, who was Yochni? She pretended to be so nice and to be so caring and really concerned about people, but really underneath, she had a lot of resentment and harbored a lot of malice towards people. I know what you boys are doing. You're waiting for me to die so you can get rich Uncle Tarfon's Yerusha. I know, I get it. So when they say, oh, Uncle Tarfon, it doesn't say Yochni, it says Keturah, he says, yeah, you boys are just like the Bnei Keturah. You're ready to sell your brother, your uncle, right away. You're willing to sell him up the river. That's what he was basically scolding in a very, very under-the-radar kind of way, in a very, very subliminal way. He was giving his nephews some musar, saying, you boys got to ease up. Don't have any tinus. Don't have broigus with me just because I made it big and your dad didn't. I'll take care of you, don't worry. But what the Gemara is trying to communicate to us is the message of anti-Semitism that is latent within the other nations. And as much as it's important for us to be a light unto the nations, there is also within that a natural resistance that exists to us spreading that light. And that tension is always beneath the surface. The Gemara says, and I'll just finish with this, that God created 3 oaths. 2 oaths he made with the Jewish people, and 1 oath he made with the other nations of the world. And this is a famous Gemara that's quoted a lot by the Neturei Karta, but we're not going to get into that right now. The first oath he made is that the Jews would never rebel against the other nations of the world. The second oath that he made is that they would not enter forcefully into the land of Israel, en masse. And the third covenant that God created was with the other nations of the world. Shelo yishtabdu behen b'Yisrael yoter midai. That you don't have permission to persecute the Jews excessively. A little bit you want to persecute them, I understand. It's natural for the Bnei Keturah to be resentful of their stepbrother Yitzchak. But to go overboard, you don't have permission. And as a matter of fact, Chazal then say that once the other nations overly persecuted the Jewish people, the other 2 covenants, that the Jews don't have a right to rebel or emigrate en masse to Eretz Yisrael, no longer applied. Because once, all bets are off, if we can't stand the pressure of the persecution, then we do have a right to break free and to immigrate and create our own state. And that's the connection between these 3 covenants. But the point is that we see that this pressure, it remains, and that's part and parcel of the story of the Bnei Keturah. Yitzchak was always perforce the favored son, the favored child. The resentment exists. Our obligation is, as Avraham wanted us to be part of that spreading of the light to the other nations, to remind us all that we're all family, but we have to appreciate that not everyone is going to want to receive that message because of that latent resentment that persists to this day. Okay? Have a great day, everybody.